Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jacqueline Murphy. I'm the Marketing Campaigns Manager here at Reveal. A big part of my job is to bring campaigns, posts, emails, and webinars like this to you guys that are important and drive your bottom lines. Today, we have an amazing webinar talking about transforming eDiscovery, especially with Onna. Onna has so many great pieces and elements to it that really can bring all the elements into an eDiscovery platform simpler and smoother, and even do work outside of eDiscovery. We're really excited to share with you some of these findings. But before we jump into it, at the end of this, we'll have a live Q&A. However, you can ask questions at any point throughout this webinar, and we have people backstage, as well as at the end of this, they're going to answer those questions for you. And then finally, if you do find that this is really helpful and you want to learn a little bit more about Onna, there should be a request Onna demo button right above me. You can click that at any point and we'll set up a meeting so that you can learn a little bit more. But with that said, I'm going to pass this off to Jeff to get started.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Really appreciate being with you here today. We are going to talk today about transforming eDiscovery with Onna. Very excited to have one of our partners and customers with us, Colin Miller from FTI. Colin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Colin Miller. As you mentioned, I'm with FTI. I'm a managing director in our emerging data practice. And I deal with a lot of troublesome data as it comes in. I've been in the eDiscovery industry about 16, 17 years now, and looking forward to a great session.
Fantastic. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jeffrey Wolf. I'm Director of Corporate Solutions here at Reveal. I joined the Reveal family after the acquisition of iPro in 2023. I'm a relative newbie, actually. I've got about a decade in eDiscovery. I was in the enterprise content management space before that. But I work primarily on the left side of the EDRM, mostly with corporate customers and their in-house teams on how they can best leverage tools like Onna, early case assessment or collections, legal hold, etc. So very excited to talk today about our session. Here is our agenda, just a rough outline of what we're going to cover in the webinar today. I'm going to start off with just an introduction of Reveal. If you're not familiar with Reveal as an organization, of the journey that we've had within the eDiscovery world since our inception, the acquisition of Onna, of course, and we'll spend a great deal of time talking about what Onna does, where it fits in the spectrum of the EDRM, some of its features. Colin's going to go into an in-depth kind of testimonial and discussion about how FTI has used Onna. And then we'll do a short little demonstration of the product, and we'll leave time for Q&A at the end. So we should be able to wrap the whole thing up for you. We're looking forward to an engaging session. I'll give you another reminder towards the end, but if you have a question, don't hesitate to put it in the chat box or the Q&A box within the platform here. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Just starting off a little bit about Reveal as an organization. Reveal launched a review platform back in 2011, which seems like forever ago now in the eDiscovery world, but has always had a focus on artificial intelligence and how they can better assist their customers, which span the gamut. Reveal has a very broad group of customers, portfolio customers that span both corporations, law firms, legal service providers, government, state, and federal agencies. But for all of their customers, their focus has always been on efficiency, automation, artificial intelligence. And to that end, they have grown steadily and consistently since 2011 with through both innovation and acquisition. So you can see there's a number of acquisitions there across the timeline. The more important ones are things like the acquisition of NextLP and BrainSpace, which very much form the artificial intelligence pipeline within the product. And of course, the acquisition of iPro and Logical just last year, as well as Legal in the legal hold space. And then finally, the most recent acquisition earlier this year was, of course, Onna. And the reason for those acquisitions, obviously, is very strategic. So the intent there was to offer a complete end-to-end freedom of choice for Reveal customers across all use cases that touch investigation, eDiscovery, litigation, all the way from collection connection, identification of content, all the way through hold, processing, review, and production and trial presentation. So we run that entire gamut as a solution provider in the space. So you can see we really want to make sure that we're available to cover any use case our customers might have in that space. And we do that through the family of products that Reveal has put together. I suspect in the future, you'll see some name changes as we align some of the names to Reveal branding. But right now it is Onna as the start. If you think about this spectrum here as the EDRM, you can think of the left side of the EDRM as beginning with identifying data sources in Onna, connecting and collecting those data sources, being able to search and retrieve surgically what you want, and pushing them further downstream in the process. Then, of course, we have legal hold notification tracking, custodian questionnaires, evidence collection and management, and that push all of that content to our two eDiscovery platforms. We have Reveal Enterprise, which is the traditional Reveal product, backed with a wide array of artificial intelligence analytics and tools, including generative AI, and then Logical, which is more of our self-service eDiscovery application designed for smaller cases, smaller review teams, those that don't truly need a whole bunch of AI involved, but just want to be able to cull large amounts of data down, do review, tagging, and production. And then, of course, at the end of that process is the kind of the world-renowned Trial Director product for presenting data at trial. And that really runs the gamut there. And what we're talking today, of course, is about Onna. So the question comes up, why do organizations need a product like Onna? And I think every presentation in the every product showcase in the eDiscovery space at some point puts up statistics like this. And this is the most current set that we have in terms of the explosion of data within the digital workplace. So this comes as no shock to anyone on the call today, but the largest function or largest portion of data in an organization's corpus is unstructured data. And by unstructured data, we mean things like chat, email communications, Office documents. So everything that you have in your Office 365 or Google Workspace environments is primarily unstructured content. It is not coming out of your Salesforce CRM. It is not coming out of your Workday HR system. It's not coming out of structured database applications. And by that definition, it is harder to identify that content, especially the chat data and email data, for the purposes of investigations and litigation in eDiscovery. So that is the focus of Reveal as an organization, is primarily around unstructured content. And 90% of that data is never actually seen. A very small portion of that is identified. It's hard to find what you're looking for through large amounts of data across multiple content repositories. That is the biggest challenge. Most organizations have a large number of applications that support the enterprise. You can see that number there, 231 applications. So the average large enterprise has 231 applications. And a statistic not listed there is that most large corporations have 3.1 different messaging systems. So slightly more than 3. I know, at Reveal, we use Slack, but we also use Teams. We also use email. And that's not uncommon for organizations. And so that makes it even more difficult, because even if you have established data retention and data destruction policies, finding the data and searching across multiple repositories is difficult, because each content repository has its own parameters and its own index. 175 zettabytes. So that is what the IDC predicts we will have in 2025, just next year, worldwide corpus of data. A zettabyte is a billion terabytes. So everyone's familiar with terabytes today, but a billion terabytes represents a zettabyte, and there's going to be 175 zettabytes of data across the world's corpus in just next year, which is up 4 times from what it was back in 2021. So you can see that this, not only the amount of data is exploding, but also the different types of data. I think that's something Colin will touch on, is that we are constantly seeing new data types being introduced within the eDiscovery space. And a lot of these data manufacturers are not initially producing eDiscovery functions as part of that. It's always an afterthought that the data manufacturer adds the ability to do any type of discovery work, whether that's preservation or collection. And so it becomes even more important that we have tools that enable that functionality. And that's really where Onna plays. Onna is a single solution, cloud-based software as a service that we offer to our customers that allows them to connect to their various data sources. And we'll touch more on that in a minute. But and then collect data into a central repository that they can run searches on. So now they can run searches across multiple data sources, filter easily, find what they're looking for, and then take action on it. So whenever I talk about Onna, I break it into these 3 pillars you see on the screen right now, which is connect, find, and act. And that's really what Onna enables, is that connect, find, and act functionality across the unstructured data of an organization. Now, there's a lot of technical information about how we do that. We do it through a series of what we call no-code connectors. You'll see a little bit more of that when I do a short demonstration of it towards the end of the presentation today. But this function is able to scale quite large. We have very, very large customers using Onna today for large amounts of their unstructured data, whether it's Slack or email content or Atlassian products like Confluence and Jira, which I think Colin will speak more about later. It is able to do that across all of those different sectors and provide a homogeneous single pane of glass experience for the end user to be able to search what they need. And that end user doesn't have to be IT. This is the thing I like about Onna the most, because I typically work with legal operations teams in my job. And they are often at odds with IT, who's always trusted to do the searches for them, but don't necessarily have the legal training and expertise to know exactly what it is they're looking for. So IT is running disparate searches across multiple disparate systems and producing data back to the legal team. And then there's this iterative process back and forth where legal says, this is not exactly what I was looking for. Can you go back and do it again? And IT is like, this is not our primary function. So it's never a priority for them. They're always getting requests from legal at 5 p.m. on a Friday to do this. So there's a large play for a product like Onna that can be used directly by the legal team to search and find the data they're looking for without the intervention needed from the IT team. And the way it does that is, as I mentioned, it builds a central data repository of unstructured content that is designed by the legal team, but to pick only from the data sources they need, from the custodians they need, even from the date ranges that they need, and then lets them search that data and then do something with it. Usually export it from the system, share the export with another organization, push it into an eDiscovery product. There are a lot of potential uses for it, but the entire process is designed to make fast decisions faster and to move less data downstream. It does a very good job of that. And it really does reduce the eDiscovery cost significantly, because what we've seen in the past is that there is traditionally 80% of the data that is sent into eDiscovery is not responsive. So when they go to actually do a review, there's a lot of wasted time and money on eDiscovery around documents that could have been called out prior to getting to the review platform. Onna allows you to be much more surgical about picking what you are going to send down to eDiscovery. So it speeds up your collection and it reduces your overall eDiscovery cost significantly. There was a bullet on that one of the previous slides that talks about some of the organizations. I was amazed to see some of the customers that we have using Onna today, names like Oracle and Lyft. You can see some of those logos up here on our slide. These are large organizations that have very targeted needs for their data identification and data collection. It's also, as I mentioned, this is something that can be used by legal service providers, because instead of having to be able to log in and out of Onna for each of their clients, there is actually a site manager functionality where one subscription to Onna can be set up for the advisory company, the legal service provider, and they can manage each of their clients within that one subscription, keeping all of their data segregated. So they can easily hop between the different companies that they're working on. So that makes it very easy for them. And with that, I'm actually going to transition over to Colin for him to share with us what FTI is doing with Onna today.
Thank you. Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, I am on the emerging data team. And so essentially we run into challenges all the time with different formats of emerging data. Really, there's kind of 4 pillars to this paradigm shift that we're seeing, going from, laptops and hard drives to just cloud-based sources. So the first being shared access. It really kind of blurs the lines of what a custodian is anymore. Do I need to collect things for every single person? How do I collect things just one time but maintain the all custodians field? With chat messages, it always comes to segmentation and what's the best short message format to present things in. With linked content, of course, can I go out and can I grab those links? And then coming with that is version control. What version of that link am I getting? We at FTI, we have a swear jar when we use the word modern attachments, because if we say attachments, then clients tend to think that it is an attachment. And a lot of times it's just a link to say like a YouTube page. So how do we figure out what's an actual document and what should we bring over? So all of these challenges that are coming up, really, you need different tools to attack different sources. And as we're talking about the new sources that we're seeing, this is a slide of just things that FTI has collected this year. Some of these are Onna sources, some of them aren't, but I can tell you I probably get at least an email a week that starts with, have you ever collected from, or are you familiar with, and then some random application. Sometimes it's one that I am familiar with, but a lot of times it's not. And I do work with Onna quite a bit, but I don't have all of their connectors memorized. So a lot of times the first place I'll go check to see if we have a method of collecting something that I haven't heard of is that Onna connector page, where I can see all of the different connectors that they have. They've also been very generous to share a lot of the roadmap information with us as our partnership has grown. And so I know what's coming down the pipeline. So if I have to use an API to do a rough collection 1 month, I'm hoping that, by the next quarter, if I get that request again, that they're going to have a connector for us to use for that particular data source. And they're adding connectors at a very good rate. So that's why I always check the list, because sometimes I'm not even aware of what's come out over the last month or so. But the first step to collecting any of this stuff is really identifying where it fits and what it's being used for, because we're always trying to kind of put a square peg into a round hole when we're talking about review, because all of these different tools do something different, but we're trying to review it like the classic documents and emails that we're used to seeing in review tools downstream. So how can we get these types of tools to look like email downstream? And the first step in that is identifying what they're being used for. So the messaging applications, the productivity suites, and you see things like Google Workspace and Microsoft 365. So there's going to be an email component to those, but these platforms have grown so far beyond that now you've got Teams and you've got all these different embedded applications within these productivity suites that you have to take account for. So how do I make sure I'm getting SharePoint? How do I make sure I'm getting OneDrive? How do I make sure I'm getting all of the Teams messages, and that it's being displayed in a way that's useful downstream, and that it's connected in the same kind of classic attachment and parent, child and parent format that attorneys and reviewers are used to seeing downstream, and how can I make it look like that? It gets even harder when you move into things like contracts and project management tools. Source code is a totally different, animal sometimes when you're doing code comparisons and issue tracking. And then social media, of course, has become more and more of an issue as we're starting to see communication kind of migrate towards that. And text messaging and all of the different formats that you see on cell phones, those can all be challenges. So one of the things about FTI is we are tool agnostic, but that means that we kind of have a Swiss Army knife of a bunch of different tools that we use. And Onna has become a very important piece of our workflows for collecting certain types of data. And not only collecting data, but supporting clients who have Onna in-house. Because we have Onna and we use it often, we understand the formats that things are going to come out, and we understand the consistency and the flexibility that it offers. So the many connectors allow us to address sources that may not have been integrated, may not have integrated export options, as Jeff mentioned earlier. And what that allows for is it just gives us kind of a flexible but consistent solution. Like the documents are always going to look the same coming out, and then there's custom metadata fields according to which source you're collecting from. But you can also have standard metadata fields if you just want it to be kind of that standard export format that always comes out the same way. We tend to over include metadata fields, I think, in eDiscovery just to be safe. But the way you're viewing those downstream is very consistent with Onna, and it makes it an easy transition from getting the data from the source at its source, rather than having to export it out into, say, like JSON format, and then unpack that and figure out how to transform that downstream. Onna's doing a lot of that transformation for you, inclusive of, parsing chat conversations into 24 hours and giving you different format options for chat. So we do a lot of support for clients that have Onna in-house. Primarily what we've seen with that support is typically Slack. We have seen some other connectors being used as well, inclusive of things like, M365 and Google and people using Onna to collect that. But we do a lot of Slack support. And one of the things that we actually were able to do with Onna as it was rolling out is we had a client that had a necessity to use the slice functionality in relativity short message format within relativity. But because they did not want to have to redact a ton of messages, they just wanted to produce the chats that were responsive and only those chats. So they needed that functionality. At the time, the RSMF export was in beta with Onna, but they worked with us to test and run that through and make sure that our client was able to use that slice functionality downstream. And it's been a really good add for flexibility of short message format, having relativity short message format as an option. One of kind of the interesting things that I saw when I saw the Reveal acquisition of Onna was I thought, I wonder what they're going to do with short message formats. So I'm excited to see what the future holds there, because I do think that there's a lot of work to be done on how we're looking at chats in general. Like, is 24 hours the right way to do it, or is there another way that we could parse data based on behavior or topics changing? And I think with the AI that's available within Reveal, I think that there's going to be some really interesting things that can be done with chat data, especially when you're talking about Onna having access to all of the communications and not having to transform that entire conversation before you get it into the review tool. And that integration is going to be a really nice piece that I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of geek out sessions we can have as that kind of grows. Jeff mentioned the Atlassian suite earlier, and like I mentioned, we're tool agnostic. So we have a lot of in-house solutions that we've built. We've got a lot of tools that we partner with. But one thing that has always just been troublesome, I think, for anyone is when they run into the Atlassian suite. There really is not a great way to export data out of Confluence or Jira. And there's actually, I think, 11 or 12 different applications that sit under that Atlassian umbrella. A lot of them are embedded into things like Confluence and Jira, whether it's the chat modules or the different ways that they're rendering certain types of information, referencing those other applications. But there's really not a great way to collect Atlassian suite tools except for Onna. So anytime we get a Jira or a Confluence request, that is our default. And we have to go in and we have to verify volumes and run some scripts, but it is a very smooth way to get all of that information, especially because the way they organize the different communications or pages or spaces or projects or epics or tasks within these tools is very unique to what they're being used for. So especially like Jira being a ticketing system for development, you've got all kinds of different attachments and different levels of tasks and epics and stories that need to be organized in a way that references their parent, task or epic. And there's a hierarchy that comes with all of that within development. And being able to reference that is very important. So Onna does a very good job of keeping all of that organized. And it really is the only solution for the Atlassian suite that I've come across that gives you kind of that defensibility and downstream actionable item where you can have somebody review a document that comes out of Onna that looks like a document and makes sense where it fits with the hierarchy of everything that's been collected for that source. And to be able to do that, it takes a lot of kind of forethought as they were developing. So, kudos to them for giving a solution to something that has historically been a bear to collect and to review. So we use it for all of the Atlassian suite connectors that they have available. And, like I said, there's a ton of applications under that Atlassian suite, but most of them are built into the connectors that they do have available. So Onna has become a very important kind of piece of our solution and we'll continue to lean on them as more connectors come out and as we see more challenges with these connectors going forward. And I'll kick it back to Jeff because he's going to show you some of the cool stuff that I'm looking to do.
Yep, thanks for that, Colin. I appreciate it. Yeah, we wanted to give you a little bit of taste of what Onna looks like, how it works, what it can connect to. So I'm going to jump out of our slides for a moment here. And we'll stop sharing those slides. And we'll start sharing my Onna interface here. So at this point, you should be able to see Onna in my browser. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of what Onna is like and how easy it is to use. This is one of the things that really intrigued me about Onna when we did the acquisition. I was able to see the product. And I really love how they laid out the product in such a way that it is very much not an IT product. It is designed in such a way that any business user can really pick this up very quickly. I've already authenticated into Onna now, and you can see on my screen just a handful of things. So Onna organizes content into workspaces. So the very first thing you have to do when you start with Onna is create a workspace, but it is as simple as giving it a name and deciding who you're going to share it in the organization with, right? So if I pick one of my colleagues and say, Randy needs access to this workspace, I'm going to give her the ability to manage it. I'm going to give it a name, and I hit create. And that's literally all I have to do to create a workspace in the product. Once I have a workspace, I can populate that workspace with data sources. So I'll just go into one of my existing ones. You can see here, this cloud data sources already has a folder that I've shared. It also has a number of connected data sources across a variety of data types that we're using within our organization, including Jira and Confluence, as Colin was talking about the Atlassian suite. But the way you add a data source is also very simple. I can just click add new data source, and up comes what we call the no-code connectors. So these are about 25 different connectors designed to connect to a variety of data sources, things like Google Workspace, Outlook, SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, Amazon S3, so for direct collection from cloud buckets of data, but also other one-off services like Box and Zendesk and Zoom, etc. So you can see there's a huge connectivity and a huge adoption base of Slack as well. There we have a lot of customers using Onna for Slack analysis. But it's really easy to add one of these. So for example, all I have to do is say, hey, I want to connect to Outlook Enterprise. I want to perform either a one-time synchronization. I want to grab content for one specific search that I'm doing, or I want to auto-sync. And I can actually even auto-sync an archive, meaning that I'm going to start synchronizing for certain custodians into my Onna instance, and then Onna will continuously manage that sync going forward. So any new data that is created by those custodians will be captured into Onna as well. And even if it's deleted from Onna, the archive function in Onna, even if it's deleted from the original data source in Exchange on the 365 side, Onna will retain its copy of that content. So I can either just say auto sync where it stays in parity, or auto sync and archive where it actually maintains a copy on our side, even if it's destroyed at the data source. And the way this actually operates is that IT, when establishes their connectivity for each of the data sources initially during implementation, but then does not need to be involved in the process when a collection needs to be done or an analysis of content. So they are providing that initial connection, and then they stay out of it going forward. I can either say I'm looking for a specific user, or I can poll the system and ask it to bring me back a list of the users in that environment, and it will bring back everyone within the enterprise, and I can select the individual users that way. I can even upload a list from a CSV. So if I have 100 people I want to target, I don't want to type them in, I don't want to select them, I can just go ahead and upload a list of those users. And it will then begin synchronizing that data to whatever start date I ask for. You can also do the same thing, obviously, with any of the chat communications. It gets much more sophisticated there. You have the flexibility to actually decide what types of collection you're doing, whether you want private or public channels, or direct messages or group messages. There's that pesky modern attachment reference that Colin made. It's neither modern nor attachments. That's our internal joke about it. They're not attachments, and they're definitely not modern, but it's just links to documents. But we are able to address those You have to provide credentials to that to do that connection, because we are then going and collecting that data from Google Drive, because that's where Slack is storing it in a lot of cases. But the same approach is I can pick which users I want to target from the instance, and it will bring me back that list, and I can just select who I want and add those to my collection for collection purposes. Once that's done, though, all of that data begins synchronizing, and it's now available here within Onna for me to search at any point. So I don't have to do anything else. I can come up to my search bar here at any point, and I can say I'm looking for references to battery and EV. I can also use very specific operators. So if I want to say I'm only looking for conversations that have attachments, or I'm only looking for messages that are in email format, the interface makes it very easy to expand those to very sophisticated searches. Or I can even use the search builder to make very, very targeted references to both metadata and text for my search purposes. But I can also save queries and reuse them. So let's go ahead and let's just do my original search here, battery and EV, and see what comes back. And it's going to bring back a fair amount of content because I asked it to search across all of the data sources. And so you can see here now, there's 166 search hits just in this workspace alone. If I run that same search, for example, across all of my workspaces, so if I back up and say, hey, let's go ahead and let's go to all of my workspaces and run that search here, you'll see even more results. So I think I'm going to have about 3,000 results here. Yep, 3379. And Onna gives me these customizable filters. So I can set up filters here, whichever ones I want to display. I can turn on and off and organize as a user. And I can say, I can search and say exactly what I'm looking for. So let's say I'm only looking for Slack communication. So I want to limit it to Slack. And so there's 79 out of 3379. I could say, hey, I'm only looking for ones that are private channel, but I've got a couple right up top here. So I'll go ahead and just click on them. And this is what the review experience is like in Onna, which is another nice thing. I didn't touch on this earlier, but Onna doesn't just collect the data into its repository. It actually does an eDiscovery level processing of that data. So that means it's deduplicating, it's demisting, it is hashing the documents, it is looking for information and highlighting that information to you automatically. So it's really designed in such a way that it is going to provide maximum recall of information to the people that are reviewing the content. So for example, this chat stream, this is a Slack communication stream between a few parties here, 5 people. But it's not only showing me that chat communication stream in a very readable fashion, but it's also highlighting edits and deletions in the chat stream to me. So it shows me the metadata of when changes were made, like Isaiah posted a message and then deleted it. Lydia here posted a message and then edited it, but also embedded graphics, linked documents, all of those are easily accessible. So I can click on any attachment and it's going to pull that attachment for me so I can see what it was. And I can very easily then get back to what I was looking at. I can look at the extracted text behind the pretty view and hit highlighting of the search terms I was looking for. It will also identify PII and automatic tag it for you in the extracted view, which is really nice. And they're expanding that going forward. From a review experience, I can do quite a bit with the document. I can PDF the document from here. I can jump to the native document in the original content source, assuming I have access to it. I can also pull up the metadata panel. So which gives me a preview of it, who has access to it, and lets me apply tags. So you can see here, I can create a new tag on the fly just by entering it. I can then search for those tags. I can also add custom fields. So if you want to add coding information to the documents, you can do that. If it's a document, hey, you're going to export, you might want to put additional information in there. And that information that will then wind up in your load file or metadata file going downstream into the eDiscovery process. So really nice review experience. It's very fast to go between documents. This was the other thing I really liked about Onna. There's literally no lag from document to document. Once you've done that work, then you can take some sort of action with it. So for example, you can see here from my operations screen, I'm able to save the query that I used and share that with another party or reuse it later. I can do a bulk tag operation. I can copy all these documents to a folder and let a third party come into the organization and do something with just those documents. So this is yet another way that corporations can set up their data in such a way that external parties like outside counsel or service providers can come in and act on some of the data, not all of it, without giving access to wide access to the systems that are behind it. So this is, a very segmented portion of the data that one department outside of my organization needs access to, and I can copy that into a folder and then just grant access to that folder to any external party that I want. Or I can export those documents from Onna into whatever format I need. So if I want, for example, if this is chat data, I can export it as RSMF. I can export documents and they're as a load file and the actual natives. Onna gives you a lot of ability to control what you're exporting and how you export it. So I can say I want all of the metadata associated. I also want to control how I package the information, how large the export packages are going to be, whether I include the dedupes with that, the document families along with my search results, etc. I can control all that as well as the format of the load file that I'm going to provide. And then what Onna does, I've already got an export here I can show you, is it gives me those documents in an export already created. So here's an export I ran previously. It is currently expired. So if I re-enable it here, that will now turn green. And this link to that export as a zip is now available for me to copy and paste into a chat or an email for any other party who needs access to this content. So now I can give them the ability to get into Onna without credentials. They don't need to authenticate just for a short amount of time until the link expires. But you saw I can very easily enable that. And they can grab what they need directly from Onna. So there's no issue about transferring the files to another unsecure system. The external party can just come in and grab what they need that they've been given authorization to access. So it does, not only does it make that connection, search, and action activity better, it also improves that data transfer and security of an organization's content. There's a lot more to Onna I'm not going to go into, but I'll save that if you want to see a one-on-one demonstration of the product. Colin, before we jump into the Q&A, any questions you have, anything you want to share with the group that you didn't?
Nothing I want to share, but I was kind of hoping we'd get some like super secret preview into what the integration with Onna and Reveal is going to look like, or a cool new feature or something. That's what I was hoping for on this one.
Let me see if I can oblige. I can't divulge too much, but what I will say is that I mentioned Amazon S3 was an import source for Onna. It is not currently an export source. You can't transfer an Onna export to Amazon S3. That is one thing I know is a priority for our development team, because both our Reveal platform and our logical platforms, the eDiscovery tools, they're both hosted in Amazon Web Services. So I know they're planning to allow you to push Onna exports to S3 as we prepare for direct integration to those platforms. I will say that they are planning a number of other new connectors, additional no-code connectors. I think there's a lot of request for mobile, like types of mobile device tools, social media, chat services that are used on mobile devices as a way to get that data in as well, because that's also very challenging. I think they're also even planning to look at the ability for Onna to connect to on-premise data repositories and get some of that content in as well, because it's still, for most corporations I've worked with, it's still a challenge. They haven't migrated everything over to the cloud. So they still have some file shares and shared drives that they'd love to be able to search at the same time as they're searching other cloud-based content.
Nice. Well, that will be a lot of cool stuff coming out, and looking forward to being able to export directly to those Amazon buckets. It'll be a really good improvement, I think, for workflows and transitions.
Yeah, and we want to make sure, obviously, it's all integrated into one platform for ease of use purposes. So I think that's going to be very exciting for our customers going forward. But yeah, happy to take questions from the audience. Oh, so we got a question in the chat there about how Onna actually connects to the data sources. That's a great question, actually. So the way it works is that each of those no-code connectors that I spoke about they have either a credential-based or a token-based authentication that is typically set up between the Reveal team, implementation team, and the customer's IT team at the time of implementation. So once that is configured once, it doesn't need to be touched. And then any of the business users that want to add that data source to a workspace can just click on that no-code connector, the already authenticated, and they can then set up whatever sync they need, whether it's a one-time or an archive. It's a great question. It's actually really very easy to do initially, and especially the token authentication ones, they tend to be very persistent, and they don't need much maintenance. What other questions? Someone asked about different levels of permission on the workspaces. Yes, so as I mentioned, Onna is really designed around collaboration. So the whole intent is that you're able to share the workspaces with the other members of your team within the organization, as well as externally. You can set view-only permissions. You can set edit permissions where they can modify the content in the data source. In other words, add tags or custom fields to it. You can also set manage, which is the top level of permission there, so that they can actually change the types of sync. For most organizations, usually view or edit is sufficient for the normal business users who are actually just getting in there and doing searches. But yeah, there's complete flexibility there to set those workspaces to any of the permission levels that are needed depending on the use case. And like I said, one of the really big benefits there is the ability to collaborate externally. So I mentioned when I created the folder, so I was just able to generate a folder in Onna, move some of my data to that folder, or I should say copy that data to that folder, and then I can set external access to that folder by just the outside firm that I need to take a look at those documents. That way, they're not able to see any of the other documents in my workspace. They can't access the data sources, but they have an initial set of documents that they can use, provide feedback on, and that will significantly reduce the amount of data that has to be pushed further downstream. It also, for the IS folks on there, it's going to be a really big benefit to the CISO that their data is not really leaving their environment, if you consider the Onna repository to be part of their own internal security. Someone asked about collecting from a data source that's not listed. That's actually one of my favorite questions. So as I said, Onna is continuously looking and building new connectors for the data sources that are out there. We're constantly getting requests for, can you connect to this, or have you heard of that? But Onna has an established way already to deal with content from data sources that it is not currently supporting direct connectivity to. And that is the concept of the folder that I mentioned, but also the platform API. So Onna has a very well written and documented public API that can be used to push data into Onna from any other data source that's not currently supported with a direct connector. So you can write a programmatic way to push data into Onna. It stores that data in a folder. You can also, if you don't want to go that route, you can simply export the data from that other system and then upload it into a folder in Onna. So that's where the folder becomes very versatile. It does allow you that place to store documents that are not connected, or I should say not collected through one of the direct connectors that are provided out of the box with Onna. Someone asks if there are complex keyword searches that can be performed. Yes. Elena, great question. Yes, so there are, you can do quite a bit of searching, of keyword searching, phrase searching. You can use some of the tagging information for metadata elements to that. But in terms of keywords, you get wildcards and proximity. They call it near in Onna's syntax. And so you can use those tools. There's also a search builder, which does a really good job of letting you build more complex queries. So if you want to ask for battery and EV, but not vehicle and only between these dates, you can actually build complex queries right in the Onna interface with those types of queries, and it works really well to let you do that. We do have teammates here at Onna, both a number of the customer success managers And some of our consultants are very good with the Onna search language and can assist our customers in those complex queries. Yes. Thank you for asking that. How long does it take to get data into the system and start searching? Well, that's a bit of a loaded question. It depends on what you're trying to target, right? So I've seen customers who just have a specific project where they're looking to analyze the communication between 5 custodians over a 6-month date range, and they're able to target those data sources, start a sync, and maybe the next day or the day after, all the data is already ingested, processed, and ready for search. It really just depends on how much data is being ingested and which data sources you're targeting. Because we're grabbing all of this information through the native APIs that are established by each data source manufacturer, some of them vary in terms of how fast we can grab the data. So it really comes down to which data sources are involved, how much data are we talking about, are there a ton of attachments to Slack chat, for example. So it's a bit of a loaded question. It is actually quite expeditious. So you're able to kind of set up your search, walk away, get a cup of coffee, or maybe come back the next morning. And a lot of it, if not all of it, has probably already been ingested. And for larger projects, obviously, it's going to take a bit of time to get your archive up to speed. So someone asked if I'd consider Onna workspace or matter specifics. Yeah, that's a great question. So there's when I first looked at the workspace concept, there's a couple of different use cases that immediately popped to my mind. A workspace could be a matter or project. So if you have a specific internal investigation, a specific litigation, you could establish a workspace just for that project, and then at the end of that project, close that workspace down. That is one approach. You could also use workspaces as more of a legal data lake, for lack of a better term, where you have, let's say it's the C-suite of an organization, and they are constantly involved in litigation, variety of types. And so you're often having to collect the same 10 people's emails and Slack communications. So you could keep those in an archive in a workspace that is just workspace called, C-suite communication. And then that could be used for multiple projects. So I wouldn't say there's one size fits all here. I think you can really utilize workspaces a number of different ways. Just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Any others, or I think that's at the end of the queue.
I just see another question that came up, but before we answer that, I just wanted to quickly jump on and thank everyone for joining us. I mentioned earlier that I'm going to send out a survey to everybody. This is just to make sure that I'm doing my job well and make sure that I'm getting you the best content out there. So as we continue to get some questions in here, just wanted to pop on and say thank you for joining and just get some more information from you guys and see how we can make these better and even more opportunities in the future. So thanks. Jeffrey, I'll hand it back to you.
Oh, thanks, Jacqueline. So there was one other question I see here about communication between Onna and Reveal. Obviously, very early in the process. It's a great question. I touched on this briefly during the presentation, or actually just after the presentation, the demo presentation. We are absolutely developing a connectivity between Onna and our eDiscovery platforms. How we roll that out, I can't provide exact times yet, but that's our immediate priority, obviously, is making sure that our Onna customers can access, can move their data from Onna into the Reveal eDiscovery platforms. So that is high on the priority list. But you're absolutely correct. You'd be, collecting the data, searching it, culling it down, doing some first pass review and even a little tagging, and then pushing that data into a review platform. Yes. And I think that's the last one. Jacqueline, am I missing anything? I think I got everything in the queue.
I think that's it from my end.
Right.
We can hang out here for a second or two, but with that said, we're going to start to wrap up here. Thank you all again for jumping on and watching this today. Hopefully we answered all your questions, and we're eager to put out more information in the future and continue to put out great content that gets you guys excited. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Look for more Reveal webinars in the future. And if you have any other questions about Onna, please reach out to us. Happy to set up a private meeting or demonstration of the product.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye.